Good evening. Let's call the City Council meeting, Caucus meeting to order. And the first item, we do have the oath of office. It was Council's desire last meeting to pass a resolution appointing David M. Schneider to fill the term of David A. Osborne. And so tonight, we will swear in our new council member, and he will join us here for the rest of the city's business. So I'm going to go on down here. We're going to do the swearing in. David, raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Kentucky so long as you remain a citizen thereof, and that you will faithfully execute to the best of your ability the office of Florence City Council Member of the City of Florence according to law? And that do you further solemnly swear that since the adoption of the present Constitution, that you, being a citizen of this state, have not fought a duel with deadly weapons within this state nor out of it, nor have you sent or accepted a challenge to fight a duel with deadly weapons, nor have you acted as a second in carrying a challenge, nor aided any or assisted any person thus offending, so help you God? Congratulations. We want to welcome Councilmember Schneider. Thank you for agreeing to serve, and we look forward to your service on City Council. The first item tonight is the Florence Transportation Improvement District Study. And Eric Hall, you want to introduce our guests?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. While Sal and Wade are coming up to the podium and Josh is getting that pulled up, I just want to give you all a quick overview of kind of how we got here today and provide a brief. So in 2022, some of you may be aware of this, but former Kentucky State Representative Sal, I think most everybody knows you here, sponsored this particular bill, which gave qualifying cities and county governments the ability to develop these TID districts. So in '24, last year, Boone County Fiscal Court was the first in the state of Kentucky that established a TID. And both Sal and Wade worked with them on this. And as you also may know, as one of the conditions of that TID board was that there needed to be a non-voting representative from the largest city, which is the city of Florence. I am that non-voting member that's part of it. We also have the president here today, Larry Brown. He's back there for the Boone County Board. So during our last budget retreat, after the county got this approved, we had some discussions on whether or not this was something we felt would work for us. So we all agreed, we discussed, and you all approved the funding to bring Wade and Sal on to do the work that they're going to discuss today, which is going to talk about what a TID is, what authority it gives us, and what we cannot do, as well as how the funding of a TID works, the staffing component, and any projects that we have identified at this point. So they'll kind of walk you all through that, but I just wanted to give you that quick overview. Wait.
Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you so much for having us this evening. My name is Wade Williams. I'm with the Montrose Group, as Eric introduced, so thank you, Eric. And with me is Sal. I think everyone knows Sal. Yep. I get the privilege of working alongside him and learning a lot from him. But we've been digging in and trying to really kind of draft a report that would give a lot of information for the city to try to understand exactly what this is, how it could benefit the city. And tonight's report is really kind of getting at that. So I'll just jump in. Sal, I know you were really involved in the drafting of this legislation. Do you want to just make a couple comments, then we'll jump in?
Basically, I chaired transportation budgeting for the state of Kentucky, and everyone has requests. Well, in the meantime, I serve on the OKI board along with Gary Wynn. And I kept wondering how all these years they're doing something and Kentucky can't, even though there are more people there. So I started looking into it, and they have a transportation improvement district. And it's a way, local control, local funding, along with the state, and you get your projects built and quicker. The 6-year road plan is a 60-year road plan, I always said. But we changed things around. And coming up here, I was just saying, boy, Florence, you're going to be our first city. Boone County was the first county. But, you guys were first. I can just name some things. The sign over 18, you're first. I mean, so many. The jug handle, Kentucky 18 Super Street. So you're going to be the first. So anyway, so after some time, I started looking into it. And I went up to Ohio, looked at theirs, North Carolina, Indiana, and everyone's building streets. They're building a road, and the developers like that. But in my bill, I have road and I have the infrastructure. Because if you build a road, if you don't have water, gas, sewer, you can't build an industrial park, you can't do anything. So that's what I put in the bill. I first had it in 2021, I just put it out there, legislature works slow, and I put it out there. And then the next year is when I really worked it. So Secretary Gray, they saw it and they said, "Oh, we don't like this thing. Oh no, this isn't good." I said, "It's economic development. It's going to work." Midway through session, they came to my office and said, "We want it. It's good. We know what it's doing now." So they were on board, and it went through the House. It went through the Senate. Had one no vote out of both chambers, and the governor signed it into law. So, I mean, this is just good public policy, and you all are going to be in control. It's just simple. And then they, in the meantime, went up into Ohio. They found out how they fund it, and they have a pot of money that they're going to let you all request money for. So we'll go through the slides and Q&A after that, or however you want to do it.
So a TID, just from a legal perspective and from the legislation, it is considered a special purpose government entity and a corporate, or body public. So it's created to coordinate the fund and transportation projects. So it's created by the legislature. In this case, the city is how it's created. Who can, there's really, you can do multiple counties, a single county, or a city. And if you're a city, you have to be a population of 20,000. So there are a limited number of cities that do qualify. Of course, Florence being one of them. A TID board is governed, and I went ahead and put up here the city and a county, how they're governed, but essentially a TID is governed by a board of trustees appointed by either the city or county. The makeup of the board of the trustees depends on whether it's a city or county, but in the city case, there's five voting trustees. Or 2 are from the chamber, and when we say chamber, it really represents doing commerce in the city. It's not technically the Chamber of Commerce. So I know that's confusing the way the legislature is drafted, but it's been interpreted in Kentucky to mean that they are conducting commerce within the city. One non-voting member from the County Planning Commission, and then they all must be residents. So again, it is appointed by the council is how that is governed. The powers, it's really broad. They can finance, construct, maintain, repair, operate, and we reference project a lot. So what you do when you establish these, you establish a district. In this case, we're recommending you establish the entire city as the district, and then you actually can identify projects within that district. So a project is identified. Has to meet a lot of requirements. It goes through a public hearing process, and it comes back to the legislature for approval. But they can purchase, construct, maintain, repair, all in exchange. You can issue revenue bonds to help fund it. You can receive and accept local, state, and federal grants. and acquire, hold, and dispose of property. I think one of the important parts here is that you can bring in multiple sources of funding. So a state may not be eligible for a federal grant, but you could be through this TID district, for example. I think Sal was smart in that they didn't allow for any condemnation, or you can't necessarily disturb utilities, and there's no special assessments or taxes and things like that you can do. So it has to be it must sort of live on its own as a project. So I think that's an important point. In terms of eligible costs, again, this is a little bit similar. Certainly all the construction, acquisition, demolition, site prep, all the equipment kind of side. And on the other side, though, you also have things like, the finances expensive to do certain types of programs like if you're IRBs and other things you can do, you got to be able to self-fund those studies, professional services. So sort of encompasses all the different costs that could go into a transportation project. This is directly from the KRS statute. Again, I put this in here just to show the broad nature of what a project is and how important that is. Whether it's a highway, parking facility, freight, other transportation projects. So it's really broad in its definition of what would qualify. So the process for approving eligible projects, again, I think this is important. The council actually approves the board of trustees. The board of trustees then goes out and evaluates projects, comes up and a list of projects. They host a public hearing. The board must hold a public hearing and get comments before authorizing a project. Once that is authorized, it comes back to this council for approval. And so it's a way to kind of to find ways to fund projects, a way to coordinate and to prioritize projects, but you're actually not necessarily, giving up authority to approve those projects. There's a caveat at the bottom: a highway project or project connecting to a highway does not require. This was put in the legislation. I think it was a way to show that, like I-75 and some of these other projects don't necessarily have to be approved by a transportation improvement district. It's going to be interesting to see how that gets played out, but I really don't think it's going to be a big issue because you're mostly focused on non-big highway projects. So what the TID can do is it allows for a mechanism. In addition to speeding up projects, it can allow for maximizing funding opportunities. Obviously, you try to maximize the state level funding strategies that are there, whether it be through the transportation cabinet or through any other state funds that are available. But it also opens up, again, your ability to leverage federal grants. It also helps you with local and regional approaches to how to fund projects, things that they get more complex in terms of tools like IRBs and TIFs to help try to fund some of a large project that could come in. You could apply some of those incremental revenues to help fund the infrastructure, whether it be roads or utility services, things like that. So it provides more access and more funding strategies. And then it also allows for the private sector to kick in those funds too, whether it be traffic studies or any other things that could go into some of these developments. It allows for those services to, again, try to kind of create a funding stack that allows for matching funds you could obtain those a little bit quicker. Appropriations are a big part of this too. So a city or county can appropriate dollars to this. In often cases, what we've seen, at least in the early adoption in Kentucky, is there's been some limited appropriations for the ones that have been established. Boone County did that. I think we're working with Warren County down in Bowling Green. I think they're contemplating that. So oftentimes there can be a little bit of that can be appropriated. One of the things we talk about in terms of critical roles and some of the services that might need to be associated with a transportation improvement district, oftentimes there's some sort of, what I call a leadership position, someone who's interacting with the board, interacting with council, interacting with the community on the types of projects. As it gets more sophisticated, obviously, and I think as a successful, some sort of overseeing of the projects themselves and the execution of those projects. And anytime you're taking in a lot of funding and dispersing that, you need to be able to account for that. So some financing, accounting kind of roles, and then if there could be admin support. On the contracted side, certainly legal is something that is pretty common. You see, there can also be stuff around certain types of transportation expertise, compliance auditing, and then a lot of there's a lot of different staffing models you can deploy. A lot of them early on, they can kind of have it housed with in-house. It's done with in-house resources. But I think as we've learned through these, I think adding and having some, dedicated staff really helps move them and makes them more effective. So there's different staffing models that are out there. The exercise we went through too was we wanted to think through, how should a board in a transportation improvement district think about this, to prioritizing projects. And this slide really just demonstrates the kind of the 4 criteria that we think are important. So thinking about safety and connectivity, focusing on these high-risk corridors, prioritizing improvements, projects that reduce traffic hazards, improve public safety, sort of that first layer. Then you can start to layer on like economic impacts, projects that can show potential growth, that can enhance access to key economic hubs, whether it be new facilities or commercial districts or industrial parks. We think frankly it needs to be feasible. I mean, we can come up with a lot of really interesting projects, but can you actually fund it? Can you actually get it funded? Projects that can leverage some of these resources, I think, are going to be important. And finally, just sort of a regional collaboration, sort of, in this case, this would be certainly the first one that has a county, city together having a TID, and how you work together, I think it's important. So again, regional collaboration and sort of a shared infrastructure philosophy. So those are the 4 criteria that we thought we should flow projects through. At least that's the guidance we're giving to a potential board. And through that, we actually identified really 3 buckets of priority projects. Not, this might be hard to read, so I think we can certainly get you more of this. But really, the top funding projects all the way to the left are there's a traffic study currently underway. We think that one's going to be really important. Master planning traffic study. There's the Mall Road Connector, Old Hopeful Church Road, and Evergreen Drive. So those 4 sort of made the top of the list. Then we had sort of what we've called a secondary project for immediate impact. These are really meant to be projects that can really quickly improve safety or improve flow. And these are things like improving stacking and traffic flow, areas like Houston Road and Kentucky 18. And you can see that, change the traffic flow configuration at Mall Road at Kentucky 18 by changing how existing intersection lanes can currently function. So there's some things in here that we think will really improve safety and connectivity. And then finally, there's a bucket here for what we view as sort of identified economic impact projects, things that could have a huge impact on commerce and on potential growth. So these are things like the on-off ramp along Weaver Road, Bushman to Spiral connection, and there could be even things along Donaldson Road and things like that we've identified. So again, these was meant to be guidance into what the board would consider, and these are the ones that through this work, we've identified as priority projects. And then we conclude the report just with some recommendations. We recommend that council consider the adoption of an ordinance that would actually establish the district. It would define its scope, governance structures, and operational parameters. We recommend the form the TID Board of Trustees, nominating and appoint the 5 voting members, implement staggered terms, and once on the board, there would need to be bylaws and should be developed that can help guide these governance and operations, and some of that's in the report. And at the end, we also think that there's some allocation of some initial funding, some appropriations that would be really good. We've got some ideas in there about how I think some dedicated staff could really help in the verb of a TID project manager, and budgets for some professional services, transportation planning, legal counsel, and economic development consulting. All are things that we think that should be considered. And that concludes my presentation, and we'd be happy to address any questions.
Anyone on the council have any questions? It's a lot.
I can
So, Sal-
basically say it's local control.
So
Yes, sir.
these are basically state roads that are within Florence, correct? Or state projects that are within Florence?
No,
Not necessarily.
it could be a city road.
Okay.
It's your city. Yeah. It gives you all control. The TID board would recommend, but you're the final vote. They can't do anything without council approval, but it's just another step to move things along.
You could apply the same principles of funding coming from the state, but for a local road, in terms of how you would put together a capital stack or a funding stack. You can use the same tools, same mechanisms, it just, the funding source changes from a state to maybe from a developer or from an outside source like a federal grant.
Diane?
So a lot of discussion, you talk about the 6-year plan being a 60-year plan, and we've seen some of that in the roadways that we've looked at in Florence, state highway-wise. This, of course, would apply to not just state highways, but as you said, to local as well. I know Eric's worked with you and talked with you. This is going to end up, if we as a council decide to do this, in the hands of the Public Services Department. And I think it's important to us as a council to kind of have Eric's feedback on this as well. You talk about the formation of a board and some of the conversations we've had is you need to make sure that the board is available for meetings. It's difficult when you're dealing with professional people to find people that can make the meetings. And just to kind of grasp how we would take this from the presentation, the information, what the county's doing, and how that would translate to what you would see this doing for the city as a whole.
So a couple things that you hit on there that I'll talk about. The first thing in regards to the board makeup. This slide is not in here, but there will be some guidance in the report that kind of outlines those 5 voting members, what kind of expertise we're looking for to make this effective. So, for example, one of those expertise recommendations for the board would be a transportation and infrastructure expert. So this could be a civil engineer or someone in transportation planning of some sort. So that would be someone we'd like to go after for the board member. Economic development specialist, someone that specializes in that particular area and has some experience, again, will bring value to the board. Community civic leaders, these are just local leaders that have a history of civic engagement to ensure the projects address the community needs and priorities. Financial professional is the other thing. Like Wade mentioned, this funding, this board will have their own bank account, and we'll have to manage this money and go through the auditing processes, and we'll have to report back to you in terms of how the money is being spent on an annual basis, or more frequently if you determine. And then finally, the regional planning representative component. So those are just a few pieces on when we look at selecting and filling this board, how we'll look to approach that to make sure we kind of meet all those needs and we establish a really positive board for this. The other piece is how it will directly impact my department, because this is what we do. We deal with all the assets within the city, and streets are one of the biggest. So many of you may know this, or maybe not. Maybe I don't talk about it enough, but we have gone probably within the last 6 years, we've went from an average of 28 to over 50 projects a year that we're currently managing. And I don't see any of that changing. Our city continues to grow and develop, and there will always be different opportunities for those projects, and things don't get any younger. So projects have to continue to be replaced, and we need to stay ahead of the game, which we've done a nice job here in the city of Florence. So the reason I bring that up is this particular staffing component is important to me, and it really actually determines whether or not I support this or not. And that's kind of a bold statement that you might say, because I want this to be successful. So if you guys aren't on board with, when I come to the budget retreat, I'm going to be looking to staff this with an individual. Now, while other communities are staffing it with multiple people, and Wade could go into that, but I don't think it's necessary. I know Ohio, some of them have 4 or 5 people. This is all they do is work on this. I'm not asking for that. Will it turn into that? If it does, that's a good thing, because we've got millions of dollars that we're putting forth in our community. So that's not a bad thing, but that's not how I want to start. So I would like to establish and oversee, a project manager that is going to work on getting the funding, and then establishing the projects and getting these projects built, and also ultimately providing the leadership for the board. making sure they stay up to speed. We all know how boards are, or how they can be. You know, they come together, it is important they come and make decisions, but they're not necessarily doing the work. So we need that individual who's going to do that work, and I feel like that is how we're going to be successful here. So, does that answer your question? And a very long-winded answer?
It does, and it is important that the Public Services Department is in tune with this because it is the roadways that you deal with every day. When we talk about state highways and projects that have been on the books for years and years, and how we can help move them forward. And I think that's important to us as a city to try and make some of those projects happen that we've been waiting for the state to be able to either fund or move forward for us. Perfect example of that's probably Mall Road.
Mm-hmm.
We waited for the state for a long time to provide funding for Mall Road. Finally, when we sat down and talked to them and talked about how we could partner with them, the money became available, and we became the group that was actually managing that project rather than the state doing it. So I think anytime we can put skin in the game, get more involved in the projects themselves and help direct our priorities, not just the state's priorities, it makes better transportation and better government for us.
Well said, Diane. Anyone else?
Eric, how do you foresee, let's say, we say, okay, we want to go with this. What's our timing look like to get staff? I mean, we have to go through the budget process first, obviously, so we're looking at least not starting until summertime.
Correct.
But is it a year ramp up to get someone in place, get a board in place, get projects identified, and kind of fleshed out a little bit, and finding funding and that kind of thing, working on that? A year and a half?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
So I think there's a couple things. Once you guys feel good about moving forward and establishing this TID ordinance, the one thing we will immediately do is go to work on seeing if we can start getting funding now. And we're going to utilize
Okay.
Sal
All right.
and others to start getting some money in the bank. That board does not have to be established yet to get that funding. The same thing happened at Boone County. They passed their ordinance. Within a few weeks, they had $10 million in the bank.
Okay.
So they don't have access to that yet, but they're working through that. So we will immediately move to see if we can't
Okay.
establish and get some funding. Now, as far as, you're correct, as far as the staffing component, we'll talk about that at the budget retreat. I'll give you an idea of where I want that individual to come in. And then from there, we'll start July 1, have them in, start establishing the board. I can't imagine any of that would take more than 6 months.
Okay. So a year from now, we'll have a really good handle on where we are with everything.
I think that's accurate.
Yeah.
I think it's important that whatever we do, if we're gonna do this, that we hit the ground running when this is in place, get the board, and then full support what you're talking about, having someone handle that head of the snake, so to speak.
Diane?
I think the other thing, they talk about $10 million. We all need to know and recognize the fact that this is money that is budgeted for transportation already. We're not asking them to take it from any other bucket. It's just taking those state transportation dollars that exist and helping move that along with any other grants or options we can find to fund these projects. So I just think it's important that we make sure we understand and people understand that we're talking transportation dollars and how we can move those to Florence to get things done.
Economic development, TIF, you can bundle everything together to keep funding this thing. It's just another tool in the toolbox, but it's local control. That's all I keep saying. Local, Frankfurt just moves in different directions all the time. I know. I heard it all the time. People will come in, mayors, and they say, well, we just need this, but local control. That way you're saying, hey, we're funding. And that's what it's all about. You're helping to fund it, and then you move on, and you name the projects, that's it.
Anyone else? Well, we can get you copies of the presentation. I think it would be helpful to review. And then just let us know, Eric know, in the next week if you have any questions. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Hall, you're still up. So would you like to talk to us about the proposed extension of the Rumpke solid waste collection contract?
Absolutely. We'll move from streets to garbage. So, many of you know, but others don't, the solid waste contract was rebid in 2018, which resulted in Rumpke retaining the solid waste and recycling collection for a new contract period that started on April 1st of 2019. The term was for 2 years with 4 optional 2-year extensions for a period up to 10 years. This is our 3rd extension that is up, and if we utilize all extensions, we would have to rebid this in 2029. So the current 2-year contract period expires on March 31st of 2025, and the extension will be from April 1st of 2025 to March 31st of 2027. With this extension, it will take the residential waste collection will increase from $6.62 per month to $7.02 per month. The recycling rate will increase from $4.41 per month to $4.67 per month. And then just a couple quick stats. Rumpke does average 4 customer complaints per year during the last 2-year period, which is not many. And we also, Rumpke services over 6,000 residential solid waste customers 1 time per week, over 1,100 residential recycling customers 1 time per week, and over 700 commercial customers, and they can be serviced any from 1 to 6 times per week. But I wanted to kind of give you guys something the best I could, the best data that is currently available, without going and doing a whole lot of work. And that's historical solid waste collection monthly rates. So the rates I'm going to compare that I just gave you are rates from 2022 are the most current. And even from that time period, everything I'm about to give you, we in 2025 will still be less than every one of these. So by county, in Boone County, currently Walton pays $12.44 per month. The City of Union pays $13.61 per month. In Campbell County, their lowest is $9.17, which is Bellevue. The next is $11 per month, which is Dayton. $12.70, which is Southgate and Wilder. It's the same rate. Fort Thomas is $14.75 per month, and Alexandria is $17.33 per month. Kenton County, Crestview Hills is currently $10.42 per month. Covington is $10.77 per month. Villa Hills is $12.70. Fort Mitchell is $13.17. Erlanger is $15.45, and Ellesmere is $21.48 per month. So I didn't list them all, but those are the big ones. So you can see that we are benefiting from a couple things. And some of these have already rebid, and I could almost guarantee you that every one of these are higher today than they were in 2022. And we're here now on our 3rd extension, and we are lower than every single one of these. So this went into effect prior to COVID and all the inflation that's taken place. In my professional opinion, I would not rebid this. Because I think you would quickly learn that we will not get this rate. So we need to take advantage of this extension and the next one to ensure we can continue to offer this rate to our community. So happy to entertain any questions, but that's my 2 cents.
Any questions?
I just paid, I think it was $287 for a year, and I live in Boone County.
Yeah.
Pat?
I know we've been through this over the years, watching the bids come in, and Rumpke's been very, very, very competitive for us. Always has been the lowest rates in the area. They do a good job. I have no issue with going ahead to continuing the contract, extending it.
Anyone else? All right, thank you, Eric. Next is discussion of a traffic code update. Mr. Hall.
It's my show tonight.
It is.
Okay, so I'm gonna make this one quick. In conjunction with the next item, which is not me, it's gonna be Josh. This is for the snow emergency update. We need to update the traffic code ordinance. So last time that was done was in 2022, and some of the changes, I won't hit on steal any of his thunder, but some of the things that will be part of the traffic code update will include things like street name changes. We changed the name of a few streets. Tom Gill Way is a new one, Betsy Conrad Way is another one. We added a new stop sign on St. Louis Boulevard there at Rampart. We made that from a one-way to a three-way. There's some new streets off of Weaver in the Avalon Square subdivision, so we're going to get those in the traffic code. And then finally, just a few minor changes of some speed limit things and prohibiting traffic on one road that I'm surprised has been missed for so long, but that's Evergreen. So as many of you know, we prohibit truck traffic on all residential, all streets. And this one has been one that has been left out. So, and I guess it's becoming a problem where they're cutting through there, and Chief may even see that some on his end with that fire station there. So those are some of the minor, nothing major this year, but those will be part of the update.
Any questions?
Did you have a chance to look at Bank Lake?
That's also on the one we're looking at.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Josh, Mr. Hunt, could
Yes,
you
ma'am.
give us a snow emergency update?
Sure, so this next one goes with the original street ordinance. The street ordinance was from 1980s, somewhere in there. The snow emergency, when it was implemented, was originally a part of the street ordinance, but after 5 or 6 modifications throughout the years, it was pulled out into a separate ordinance. So the last time we've looked at this ordinance was in 1993, I believe, and as you know, it's had a pretty big snow emergency within the city. Typically, when we have big snowstorms like that, we get a lot of calls, which isn't, it's not unusual. But this time, there was a lot of social media buzz and then quite a few calls about the difference between Tier 1, 2, and 3 snow emergencies. Boone County Fiscal Court, the City of Union, the City of Walton, they operate underneath the 3-tier standards, and we operate for a long time, or since the 80s, as a snow emergency. So there was some confusion of, if Florence is under a snow emergency, but Boone County is under a level 2, what does that mean for me? So Eric, the mayor, and myself, we got together, and, Melissa pulled the original ordinance, and we started going through it, and it was actually out of date in a few other areas. So the Tier 1, 2, and 3 is something that we're proposing to change, and that's outlined in my memo. The next change is how you notify people. So back in '93, I would imagine that you would use the fax machines to notify the news of if there's a snow emergency. That was originally the police department that handled all that. So there was a form that was filled out. PD would handle it. They would probably fax or call it in, probably fax since it was a form, to notify the news stations of the snow emergencies. We really don't need to do that anymore. Melissa has everything basically pre-written, all the social media posts ready to go out, and she just clicks an email when it's time to send something out. So we've kind of been operating underneath that way for the last 10 years. We just want to formalize it in this ordinance that the powers to issue that wouldn't be on the police, it would be on Melissa, the city clerk, to send that to the news and then push out on social media because she does manage all the social media. The other section of this, it kind of goes back to Eric's ordinance that he just discussed, and that is the parking restriction section. So that, all the fines and everything that are associated with, if you're on the run, we fine you, that's still in that street ordinance. The one thing we want to clarify in this ordinance is that anytime that there is snow accumulation over 2 inches or more, you cannot be parked on the city street. If you are, you're subject to the fines that's outlined in the snow ordinance. And that is pretty much the highlight of the changes outside of, and this is too good not to share. So the 1980 original snow emergency, there was a caveat in there that said that you were not allowed on the roads, right? You could not be on the roads unless you had a Blazer, a Jimmy, or an El Camino. So when we were going through this, we couldn't help but to wonder who on council had the El Camino. We were trying to figure out what David had. We don't know. But yeah, you could drive wherever if you had a Blazer, or El Camino is the one that got me. But that was removed, I think, in the 90s.
Diane?
So just a question, we're talking about setting up level 1, level 2, level 3, rather than just a blanket snow emergency.
Correct.
And the discussion about the parking restrictions is included in that.
Yes.
I guess because of the concerns we've heard over the couple of years, how will we be enforcing that? It says provision, violators may result in fine or towing. You're not allowed to park if there's more than 2 inches of snow.
Sure.
So if we're going to have that in writing in this ordinance,
Yeah.
what's the plan for the enforcement of
It's
that?
probably not outlined in the memo very well, but the ordinance will reference back to the code of ordinances versus actual ordinance. The code of ordinances parking section, which I forget exactly what section that is, but that is outlined in the actual street ordinance. When you start dissecting all these ordinances, I mean, there's literally 8 or 9 that are connected to this original policy. So we talked about totally appealing all these and starting over. That became way too confusing. We got with Tom, we worked through that. So the amendments that Eric just went over, we'll still have all the provisions that allow the ticketing to take place, which is cited to code board and handled through that mechanism. In the ordinance that you'll get from me strictly related to the snow ordinance next week, it'll have a reference in there to that specific section of the code of ordinances. So it is handled. It's probably not highlighted in my memo, but you'll see it in the ordinance next week, how it's handled.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Josh, would you like to speak on the centralized collection of
Sure.
occupational taxes?
So I checked before we got in here, and I couldn't find any legislation that was introduced, but I was on every month or so, I get on a call with KLC, and they go through their legislative priorities. One thing that is, growing concern to them are these preemptive bills, and I know the mayor sent out an email to you all from KLC that discussed 3 different preemptive bills. The one that's kind of gaining ground is they're expecting this week that legislation will be introduced that mandates the centralized collection of local occupation fees. For those that were around in 2012, this was a huge push. It failed. They didn't change anything, but they tried in 2012 to take this over. And then for those that in the audience are maybe unfamiliar with how this process works, we collect occupational license fees. I think 86 out of the 120 counties in the state of Kentucky collect the fees, and there's hundreds of cities that collect it. The funds are used for, funding essential services, police, fire, infrastructure improvements. And under the current system, the cities and the counties are responsible for collecting and managing these funds, ensuring that local oversight and accountability is there. However, the bill, and I haven't read the bill because it hasn't been proposed officially yet, but the rumor is that they're looking to strip local governments of this responsibility and transfer it to the state, or there's even some rumors that it could be a third party that collects it on behalf of the state. There's also a lot of conversation about the state would charge a fee to do this service, so it would be a revenue collecting mechanism for them as well. I was telling Vice Mayor Whalen earlier today that I really wish Mr. Skis was here. We went through this in 1975 when there was police courts, and I wouldn't do it justice if I tried to explain it now, but essentially there was police courts in all cities throughout the state of Kentucky, and it was removed, and the state took that over, and there was supposed to be all this promises as it relates to fees going back to the city, but the city never really did receive those fees at all. This is being framed as a pro-business measure and economic driver and cutting red tape. That's how it's being framed down in Frankfurt right now, but the reality of it is that it would be a nightmare for the cities, and this is not a new piece of legislation. This is something that we've been dealing with for years. Just about every city and county within Northern Kentucky has passed the same resolution, and that is what we're asking of you next week, is to take up this resolution for consideration.
Any questions or discussion?
I 100% encourage council to pass this resolution. Sal, when he was here, was talking about local control, And this is just one more opportunity for the state to take away another piece of local control. And as Josh said, when they took over the police courts and promised us base court revenue, we no longer get base court revenue. All of that goes to the state. They took over the telecommunications tax with a promise that we would be held harmless and always get exactly the same amount with a built-in accelerator for inflation. And later said they were only kidding. We don't get that. We aren't held harmless. We lost a lot of money with the telecommunications tax. This is just one more opportunity for the state to put their hand into the pie, take their portion out, and see what's left over for cities and counties to collect. So when the resolution's placed in front of us, I strongly encourage everybody to read it, contact your legislators, and make your voices heard.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, we do have some good news to report. I'll call on Jason Lewis.
Certainly do, Mayor. So last couple weeks ago, last week, we received our annual credit rating from our ratings agency, Moody's. So for those who don't know, Moody's is one of the largest rating agencies in the world, along with Standard & Poor's. So we received a AA1 rating, which was no change from last year, and received a no outlook grade as well, meaning they don't expect our credit rating to change over the next year. Some of the highlights in this report. So you can see the AA medians. So this is kind of compared to the benchmark for AA's. We stack up extremely well within our peer group. For me, I look at this and I think, well, what does it take to get a AAA rating, right? Probably just need to issue a lot more debt, which I don't think we want to do necessarily. So, again, what this rating is all good news here. For context, the state of Kentucky is a AA3 or a single A rating. The city of Covington is an A1 rating. So we're rated highly against the state and some of our larger peer cities as well. Overall, I think the key takeaway here is that, in the future, if we decide that we do want to issue revenue bonds, we do want to issue debt to pay for projects or what have you, the ratings agency has a lot of faith that we can repay our debt. And I think that's a good sign, and that shows that, the fiscally conservative approach that the city's taken over the past 20 years, however long, is recognized by the financial industry at large. So a lot of good news here. I wanted to share that today. So that was all I had. I'll take any questions.
Any questions? All right. We have a few more days to review the recommendations for our Parks Master Plan. The website, they've continued this through Thursday, February 6th, so you can go to the City of Florence website. There's also posted on social media as well. City of Florence, in collaboration with Hawksworth Blood Center, is hosting a blood drive. That's this Thursday, February 6th. You can register online through Hawksworth or the city website, or contact Hawksworth at 513-451-0910. All donors will receive a Lifesaver long-sleeve waffle shirt as a thank you. The city will have a President's Day display February 17th to 21st from 9 to 4 in the lobby of the Florence Government Center. Just come on up and check it out. Also, join us for our upcoming Book and Literacy Festival. There will be a Books and Bottles evening event at the Florence Nature Park Event Center on February 28th from 6 to 8:30. The Friday evening event requires registration and will have light snacks and refreshments. Registration for the evening event is online with the link available on the city's website. And then on Saturday morning, join us for children's programming, March 1st from 10 to 12 p.m. at the Florence Nature Park Event Center. The Saturday morning event will include author story time, a puppet show, and Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. So if you have any questions about those events, contact Tina Benjamin, our Community Services Coordinator, at 859-647-5425 for more information. Is there any department heads who desire recognition? Anyone on council?
I do.
You do. I didn't know if you were just.
I'm sorry, me.
I didn't know if that was Pat or Leslie. Leslie, go ahead.
So my children, Cross is in 6th grade and Elin is in 8th grade. They attend R.A. Jones Middle School. Today, a young lady in the 7th grade at R.A. Jones is in the hospital because of a suicide attempt from bullying. And I just wanted to ask the city to remember her in your prayers tonight, as she has not woken up yet, but she could. I believe this is the 5th person in our Boone County schools who has made a suicide attempt, the other ones being successful this school year. And I would also make a plea to the city, when we make our budget, to consider the mental health needs of our community, our children who are struggling, and do what we can to enhance their lives in a positive manner.
Thank you for sharing that. I will say there is a mental health summit usually hosted by Boone County Schools. If you have the opportunity to attend that, I would highly encourage it. It is very insightful and meaningful conference to attend. And I think a lot of educators go to that conference to be able to spot those students who may be at risk. So this is a very tough situation dealing with our children in our area. So thank you for sharing that. Anyone else on council? Anyone in the audience? All right. There's no need for closed session, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Nguyen, second by Ms. Whalen. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.